Hello again, everyone. Welcome back to the program. My name is Jeff, otherwise known as the Economic Prepper. I wanted to address something that's been a big topic for Bitcoin for the last couple of weeks, maybe even longer. It's a proposal to improve Bitcoin, which is known as a BIP. Now, what is a BIP? What does it mean to you? Why does it matter? What are some BIPs in the past? Are they good? Are they bad? Or sometimes both? And how do we get past some of the mental barriers that people have towards adoption? I want to go over all that, but let me start right at the top here. So, BIP, a BIP proposal, BIP 177 is being proposed. I'm going to explain what that is, but first, what is a BIP? Well, have I seen a BIP in the past? BIPs are improvements to Bitcoin from the original. So, after a little while, or at any time, someone can propose a change or an improvement. Hopefully, the change is an improvement to Bitcoin. Now, one example is seed words, right? For those of you who have worked with seed words and wallets and Bitcoin in the past, in the last several years, you know that there's seed words to every wallet. And usually 12 or 24 words that you remember instead of remembering this long, crazy number and letter combination of 0 through 9 and A through F. That's your private key. Rather than trying to remember 0, A4, 9, blah, 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 and remembering all that for 16, 32 characters. It's a long sequence. They propose 12 words to translate that key into something else that can be remembered. And you type in the words, you type in the right sequence, your wallet gets restored because your private keys are looked up and say, okay, that's you. That was a BIP. That was the 137 or 138. You guys can check me on that, but that was a proposal to improve Bitcoin. That was done a while back, been around for a long time now. But the original Bitcoin and the OGs that are out there know this. Originally, you didn't have those seed words. So that was an improvement. That was great. There have been other proposals, such as changing the block size or seg width to shrink shrink the signatures. Some of them have been good. Seg width they approved, and they also adopted different block sizes. But block sizes led to a fork for Bitcoin Cash, Bitcoin Satoshi Vision. So that was not necessarily good for Bitcoin. So you have some good ones, you have some bad ones. So now you got BIP 177. It is proposing to rename the smallest unit of Bitcoin to Bitcoin. Now, that sounds bad, and it is, okay, because it's going to confuse people. But I'm going to tell you why this isn't necessary. But here's one of the reasons that people are proposing is so you can understand if Bitcoin is too large right now. It's over $100,000. People don't understand you can buy a fraction, and the fractions get to be very small because there are 100 million Satoshis in one Bitcoin. So it's a really tiny fraction of a Bitcoin right now. So I think it's the problem is that humans have a problem with understanding frames of reference and scale. For example, exponential growth. Bitcoin's been growing like crazy. For less than 2 decades, it went from $1 to over $100,000. That is 10 million%, if I did that math right. 10 million% in less than 2 decades. That's crazy numbers, crazy growth, hard to imagine. Twice as fast as the internet over the same kind of time frame. And I know that Bitcoin's not even 20 years old. It's about 16 or 17, depending how you do the math. But we'll give it some grace and say 2 decades. The internet didn't grow that fast. Cell phones didn't grow that fast. 10 million% in less than 2 decades is unheard of. But the problem now is that most people have a frame of reference, okay? But they need a frame of reference, like they know what $10 is. But it doesn't translate well to Satoshis because they're so small. Well, $10 doesn't translate well to Bitcoin because that number is so large for one Bitcoin. So you wind up doing 0.00001 and try to get the zeros right. So that's why they're trying to propose changing the name of Bitcoin for the big unit to the small unit, because there's 100 million Satoshis in the 21 million Bitcoin. That's going to make math and numbers very confusing for people, because people need a frame of reference. For example, you look out in the horizon, you see mountains. How far away are they? How big are they? It's hard to tell because you have no sense of reference. You have no frame of reference. Same thing if you look at a tall building or a tree or a plane up in the sky. How high or how tall is that? Even when you look at the moon, if the moon changes its position against the horizon, it looks bigger against the horizon because your frame of reference is changing. The moon didn't get closer. It just got closer to the horizon, and now the human mind relates it to objects on the horizon and makes it look bigger. Same thing for that's for big units and like the distance to the sun. Hard to fathom that, hard to understand those big numbers. But if you bring things like small as well, that's hard to understand. For example, the metric system compared to the inch and feet system. Like it's hard to figure. It was hard to figure how much a centimeter is. But when you understand there's 2.5 of those, give or take, 2.54 centimeters in an inch, you get kind of an idea of how big it is, and you kind of know what an inch is. You can kind of measure it with your fingers. You kind of know it's about, this much of my finger, that's an inch. Okay, so you got that relative scale. You can measure an inch and a foot. That's why that's stuck around for so long. But when you get to smaller units like millimeters, because there's 10 of those in a centimeter, or microns, and that's a millionth of a meter, that's hard to fathom. That's really, really tiny. How big is that? Well, if you make it to something relatable again, like a human hair, which is 70 microns on average, they're like, okay, I know about what 70 microns is. I get it. So if you, again, that frame of reference, now I'm going to bring back to Bitcoin, okay? Bitcoin has the big number, the Bitcoin that they want to change. I don't know what they're going to change that to, but they made us, how are they going to, I don't know what the plan is to change that number, but they're going to change the little measurement, the Satoshi measurement. There are 100 million Satoshis in one Bitcoin, which also is hard to fathom because that doesn't translate well to say $10. We know what $10 buys you. $10 is like a cheap subscription or a lunch or a couple gallons of gas or a stop at a convenience store. We have a $10 bill. We know what it takes to earn a $10 bill roughly. We know roughly what a $10 bill buys us because we spend $10 on the average every single week, maybe even most every day. So we get an idea what $10 buys you. But in terms of Bitcoin, now you're talking Bitcoin compared, $10 to compared to a Bitcoin, that is 1/10,000th of a Bitcoin. So that's a lot, like 4 zeros, I believe, than a 1. That's hard to do. Or Satoshis. You look at the Satoshis, and that's hard to do because it's 8 places, which means you can't just move comma places. It's 100 million. So I think it's about 10,000. Let's just say Bitcoin's $100,000 to make the math easy right now. $10 is roughly 10,000 Satoshis. Now, it's hard to walk into a store and see something priced in $10 or 10,000 Satoshis. They're like, what's a Satoshi? And why is it 10,000 compared to just $10? That's hard to fathom. So that's why they're proposing BIP 177 to get, again, a human relatable size, I think. But it's not. Satoshi's too small. You're going to rename Satoshi to a Bitcoin, which will confuse the original people with Bitcoin and confuse people that see this small increment, which is, a fraction of a penny. So what do you do, right? Well, here's the difference. Here's something that's out there. If people did a little bit of homework, they would know that there's a third increment and third measure of Bitcoin that's been defined. Now I have some I have some unopened Ballet wallets from a previous trade show, and you can see that they were measured in 0.01 Bitcoin. Now I have one that's open, so you can see the back of this, because if I flip this over, they put it on both sides. So I get an open package, so here we go. Here's one again. Again, 0.01 Bitcoin. But if you flip it over, it says 10,000 bits. What's a bit? A bit is 1/1,000,000th of a Bitcoin. So, or 100 sats. So that it's a little bit more relatable because you move the decimal place twice to get to 1 bit. So if Bitcoin is $100,000, if I move the decimal point twice, first to the comma, then in front of the 100, now it's 0.10 is a bit, or $0.10, that's a dime. To make it a little bit easier to understand, let's measure out what 10 bits is equal to in dollars. 10 bits is equal to the number in front of the comma in pennies. So if Bitcoin is $100,000 to $110,000, then 10 bits is 100 to 110 pennies, or 10 or 11 cents, roughly a dime. So if a Bitcoin is $100,000, a bit is a dime. So now the average person that can walk into a store and try to buy something for $10 can say that's 1,000 bits, which is also, did I do that right? I'm sorry, 100 bits. 100 bits or 10 dimes. Because 10 dimes equals $1, so 100 bits would equal $10. It's a little bit more understandable because now you've got a translatable number from bit to a dollar. So you have a frame of reference. 10 bits for Bitcoin, $100,000 Bitcoin, 10 bits equals a dollar, or roughly a dime. Now, I'm going to bring this all back full circle to when this guy was first introduced, okay? Now, this isn't the same version, but this goes back to the Federal Reserve in 1913. Back in the day, if you've ever watched an old movie, an old show, or maybe a grandfather or a grandparent told you about this, maybe even a great-grandparent, but there used to be a saying back in the black and white movie TV time frame, shave and a haircut, 2 bits. Now, what that translated to was shave and a haircut. You go to a barber, get a shave and a haircut for 2 bits. What did 2 bits mean back in the day? It meant one of these. Now, this is a more modern quarter, so it's not silver, but 25 cents used to be 2 bits back in the early 1900s. To translate to today, I just said that a bit is about a dime. So when Bitcoin equals 125,000 per Bitcoin, 1 bit will equal 12.5 cents. So 2 bits will equal 25 cents, which brings us back to the future. Now we have a relatable number. By using bits, people can comprehend Bitcoin, and it's easy to understand. Bits in a Bitcoin. The name is the fraction is part of the full name. Bits to Bitcoin. Use bits. You do not need BIP 177. Vote no on that. What you need to use is bits, because a bit, or a millionth of a Bitcoin, is roughly equal to a dime. Might be worth a little bit more soon, but it'll give you an idea. You can start to understand prices in terms of Bitcoin if you just use bits. So I've said a lot today. Hopefully this helps people understand what a BIP is, why the 177 is not a great idea, and why you can use the phrase bit for a Bitcoin and make it understandable for most people to relate to. You can price things in terms of dimes, which is equal to a bit. So, a lot said today. I'm going to leave it there. I will read all the comments. Looking forward to reading your feedback, and I'll see you in the next video. Take care.